My name's EdMundo Martinez. Thank you. I am a member of the coalition. As Hunter mentioned earlier, I am part of the steering committee as well. I do a lot of work with the Bronx Alliance, as well as other nonprofits and community groups. Something that I like to make very clear is that I am first and foremost a community member. I do not get paid for my work. I do this out of love of community and spaces. And I think that's something that we should be very mindful and keep thinking about when we have these kind of conversations and about this work, that the work that we're doing is for the people. And yes, a lot of us get paid to do this, but there are many, many very important people who do not get paid, and those are often the people who are impacted the most. And with that, just a little anecdote for myself. When we're talking greenways, let's also be mindful that as an avid cyclist, greenways are more than just a space for cycling, and it's a space to walk, it's a space to sit and meditate, it's a space to teach young people or elders about nature and get them connected to nature, whether it's the waterfront or trees or grass. So when we're talking greenways, love to see a lot of this stuff, but it's about providing safe, car-free spaces for people to connect to each other, their community, and nature. With that said, in a few minutes, we're going to be talking to Dennis Markatos-Soriano. He's the executive director of the East Coast Greenway Alliance, and Emily Gallagher, who's a New York State Assemblymember, and these are folks who are super helpful in the Greenways Coalition. This portion is called Past, Present, and Future of the New York City Greenways Coalition, but we're gonna kind of more so have a conversation along of the respective work that they have done in the sense of past, present, and future, because necessarily a lot of the stuff that we do in the coalition isn't necessarily so coalition facing. For instance, when I'm harassing Ted on some of these calls, yes, I'm harassing him as EdMundo Martinez, but it's also as a member of the Greenway Coalition. So that's just one of the aspects that I want to kind of highlight in this conversation. So Brian did steal some of my thunder of kind of getting you folks involved and activated. So I'm just curious, how many folks got here today in public transportation? Awesome, that's lovely. Lovely. How many folks used a bicycle? Nice, I did also. The ferry? Me too. And it's okay if you drove, we won't throw fruit at you, but if you drove at some point in part of today's commute, I'm with you. I drove to Ferry Point Park, then I took a ferry, and then I took a city bike. Like, that's what this whole thing's about, right? So yeah, so again, awesome. We would love to have had the questions be like folks talking the question, but folks filibuster and take up space, so that's why we have the cards. So what I will ask is, if you see your card being read, if you can, stand up or maybe raise your hand so that the person who's answering it can answer it to you directly. And maybe it's not an answer, it might just be a response. My meditation teacher taught me that. It's not really a Q&A, it's a question and response, because you may not like what you hear. So with that said, I'm going to introduce Dennis Markatos-Soriano, and then right after that, it'll be Emily Gallagher, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Thank you, EdMundo. And Ted talked about the coffee being good, but I got to say the fruit and the sandwiches, pretty awesome, right? No? It was good, it was good. So my Greek great-grandparents came to New York in the 1920s because New York was indeed the greatest city in the world. But I'd have to say, Amsterdam, Paris, I don't know, it's tenuous. Is New York the best city in the world? And I'd like to say that if we complete the greenway systems that we've been talking about, I think we can seal the deal, and can indeed be that. So I want to put that out there. So I want to talk about this moment that we're in. This is the federal infrastructure moment that we've all been waiting for. $550 billion in transportation investment is moving right now. We've got 2.5, 3 more years of that, and then it's going to go down. Okay. So now is the moment for us to be organized, just like this great space, to work as a coalition, to work together, to get Senator Schumer, to get members of Congress, of the House, and of course, to get our presidential administration's attention and to get the funding that we need to complete the Greenway systems here in New York. So this is our moment. Like Andrew said also, we have a record economy, historic economy. Low unemployment, inflation is back down, 2.3, 2.4%, it's almost perfect. We've got the interest rates coming down now, just started that yesterday. So, and we've got record stock prices again today. So let's not think small, let's think big. What are we gonna do? How are we going to be visionary in this moment? And how are we gonna push the envelope like we've never done before? So, meeting the moment. I'm gonna talk about some of the models in other cities. I live in Durham, North Carolina right now. I lived in New York in 2008 to 2010 and loved it up 94th and 1st Ave. And I have to say, the biking was not quite as good back then. So nice work to everyone in this room making it, really transforming it, just like Andrew said earlier as well. So the East Coast Greenway was actually born in New York City in November of 1991. The director of the Open Space Planning Department here in New York, Karen Votava, was a co-founder. And we started it at the Amsterdam Youth Hostel, now the hostel up on Amsterdam Ave. That's where the founding meeting was. And this group, they were the founding riders back in 1992 in the summer. And they rode, the original vision was from Boston to New York to DC. Since then, we've grown that vision and we've grown our impact. So the East Coast Greenway goes from Maine to Florida. It goes from Canada to Key West, 3,000 miles. That's the vision. And it's also, how do we experience the East Coast? So it's from the moose to the manatee, you know? It's from the puffins to the pelicans, if you will. You like birds, right? Yeah? And if you like pies, it's also from the best blueberry pie to the best key lime pie. So it's, how do we experience? Get people out there biking, walking, running. And we've had people bike, run, and walk the whole East Coast Greenway. But the experience is not ready for everyone yet. We want it to be ready for little kids to their grandparents. And that's the work that we do. So in the past, over 30 years, we have moved from that original vision, that idea, that pie in the sky, if you will, $20 million in donations to our nonprofit. We've turned it into $2 billion in infrastructure investment to build out 1,100 miles. It's a little faded there, but I hope you can see it. This is a trail connecting cities, all your favorite cities, and a lot of communities in between, small towns. 450 communities are connected by the East Coast Greenway today. And that's a big vision, but we're working at it. We've built up our staff. We now have 16 amazing staff who are working with incredible partners, like everyone in the New York City Greenways Coalition. One of those great staffers is here today, Sophia Barandiaran, based here in New York. And she's based in Queens, and she covers New York and New Jersey, doing outstanding work with us. And here's a basic map of the East Coast Greenway going through New York. Usually, we're a trunk line, like this. But here in New York, we know about the vision. Again, Karen Votava laid out the Greenway plans for the whole city, and she set us on course to go all the way around Manhattan and to go through the Bronx up to Westchester. As you can see, if it's in green, it's completed. But there are a number of sections that are in blue, that's on road. And we want those to be the safest roads we can find until we improve it and we bring it all off-road. So there's a lot of work that goes into this, as we've heard today. But those are some of the sections, just to give you an idea of what we're building here in New York. The East Coast Greenway has become the most visited park in America. 50 million bike rides, runs, and walks take place on completed segments of the East Coast Greenway. And we're not even close to done. We want to reach 300 million. We want to 6x what we've got. What would that mean? The visitation of the East Coast Greenway would be equal to the whole national park system, because we bring the access to the outdoors to where people live. We make it possible for people to weave in that peace of mind that you get, those miles of smiles from where people live to wherever they want to go. That's our work. So we're growing, it's moving forward, and we have a transformative vision for our country. And that's that 30% of trips are by bike and by foot by 2030. So today we're at 14% of trips nationwide. New York City is ahead of the game. And again, Amsterdam and Paris are also ahead of the game. So how are we going to be the greatest city? We got to grow biking and walking and receive all the benefits that come from that: health, environmental, and economic. You know, Andrew mentioned, how do we build out the Greenway? How do we get the funds? Well, we have to grow the economy. I would also say the opposite. How do we grow the economy? We build out East Coast Greenway. We build out greenways throughout New York City. It's a virtuous cycle. It really is. That's what we need to build. And so that's our vision. And this is the most fun and accessible climate action you can take, is biking and walking for everyday use. And again, it's that first mile and last mile to transit, that interface with transit, absolutely. But I'm really excited to talk about this, to talk about stories, some of our places. You saw Midtown Manhattan, the Greenway on the East River. This is in the Schuylkill River Trail in Philadelphia. And this is across Liberty State Park over in New Jersey. We're working on some good stuff everywhere. I want to talk about Central North Carolina, and I'll bring that up later. I don't want to get into it too long, but they built out Wake County, which is the county where Raleigh, the state capital of North Carolina, is. That county has poured money into greenways, has invested in greenways, so they have 200 miles of greenways. And that's not a very big city. So New York's got to create a little more separation from cities like Raleigh. Also, we talk about Year of the Greenway here in New York, the governor and the legislature in North Carolina. And that's not the most sympathetic legislature in North Carolina, to be real. But they declared 2023 as the year of the trail. And they doubled funding for trails as a result of that. Got more people out. It was a huge thing. We were the fiscal sponsors of that. So we've got greenways growing all over the place. It's people across the aisle. You know, we can connect. And so we'll talk about that again. Here's Sophia's information. But let's get into stories and talking some more. Yeah. Okay. Where do you want me to go?
One more. It should go right back to there. We go.
There it is. Okay.
All right, next. Mike, please. I'm going to hang out here amongst, that don't feel good. No shade to anyone who likes it. The next person will be Emily Gallagher. Give you a little opportunity to share about some of what you've been doing and a part of and who you are.
Great, thanks so much, and it's been so great to meet you, Dennis. I'm Emily Gallagher. I am the Assembly Member for District 50, which is Williamsburg and Greenpoint in Brooklyn. And I really come, in many ways, out of you all. My activism was very much born alongside my conversion to cycling as my main form of transportation when I became a New York City resident. And that's because when I moved here, I was an underpaid creative person juggling multiple jobs. I'm sure many of you guys relate. And I really learned that the most economic way for me to get around was the bike that my roommate found in the garbage. That was a real piece of crap and very heavy, like 1960s Schwinn. I got the wheels replaced, and I would lug that thing back and forth across the Williamsburg Bridge and all around, and I discovered the joy that came out of cycling, and I met so many people riding my bike that I decided the next time I went to visit my parents, I'd bring home my childhood bike, which was a little nicer, and I still didn't have to buy it, and I rode that for about 10 years, and then not until 2017 did I actually get a nice bike that I ride now. So running for office was something that in part came out of the experiences that I had with the people that I met through cycling and through grassroots local advocacy. Folks that are in this room right now, maybe even my district leader is here, but that's Luke. But this was something that was really where I saw a lot of inequity. I saw there was almost no attention paid to people who did not drive in policy. I saw that we were really treated like lunatic fringe if we counted on cycling as our main form of transportation. And I also saw that the deaths of people that I knew, given the poor infrastructure of cycling in the city, were really treated like, collateral damage. And I feel that that is unacceptable. So one of my goals in my role is to bring a different perspective to the New York State Transportation Committee, which I sit on. And I think I am probably the only cyclist. Oh no, Pat Fahey. Oh, but she just became a senator. So Pat Fahey and I were pretty much the only cyclists that were on the Transportation Committee in the State Assembly. And we were constantly having to fight, and I will continue to fight for the voice of other users of the road. So this is a big part of who I am, and I was lucky enough to be at the launch of this very organization, and it was really, if I should have brought a picture of me then, because you wouldn't, I'm still beautiful, but you wouldn't believe how old I am. So I am just really excited to push for funding for bike infrastructure and, moreover, for recognition of the many different kinds of people who use cycling and really bring better attention to the good actors and invite people, makes New York City a place that invites people to ride rather than dares them to ride. So that's a little bit about who I am, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions you have.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Emily and Dennis. So as you have your questions, feel free to write them on those cards. Someone will snatch them up and then get them to me. So one of the things that I would like to talk about as someone coming from the Bronx, also being seen as folks on the fringe when it comes to cycling or not wanting to drive a car everywhere you go. And also that's been a very hot word in, I would say, in a lot of spaces, whether it's org or city agencies, is equity. Oftentimes we don't see the same stuff in the different spaces. Full disclosure, that question for the commissioner earlier was the CEO was my question. EDC spaces do look different than other spaces, and that's not throwing shade on the other agencies, it's just the reality of it. So how do y'all handle equity issues in the spaces that y'all manage or are a part of?
I think this is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to building bike infrastructure, is the way that the shorthand that people have internalized around what a bike lane means. To many communities, it means gentrification. It means raising rents. It means displacement of the community. And I think it's really vital that we find a way to have conversations around cycling that don't center on the spandex guys. And no shade to any of you who might be spandex guys, but moving towards the people who are using this as a daily form of transportation. One of the hardest things in the assembly that I see when we're trying to get things like Sammy's Law passed is that because when Robert Moses used his racist formula to build out the suburbs of New York City, he made many of them have absolutely no connection to public transit. And many of those communities are now much more diverse than Robert Moses ever intended to be. And so what we see is folks are basically glued to their cars. They're afraid of having transit. Well, we have major financial barriers to having new transit other than buses come in. And cycling really makes the most sense in many of those communities, but because of the stigma around cycling, we see those very electeds fighting against something that would actually help so many of their residents. So I think that there is a broader conversation to be had about how do we bring in elected officials to understand who's actually using bikes in their communities and having more dialogue with them. The only dialogue that I've been able to really get to move forward is around delivery cyclists, but then we get a caricature of someone going the wrong way with a, gas-powered e-bike, not stopping at stoplights, that sort of thing, and we're missing out on the bulk of the people who are using cycling for work. So I think we have to fix the messaging a little bit before we're going to be able to get more of my colleagues to come on, and we really need folks to organize in those communities for this. So I think that's a bigger infrastructure problem for the advocates.
Yeah, in terms of the engagement that's necessary, I'd say just a couple things. It's just so important. We're not just a ribbon of asphalt. We're not just sort of cookie cutter. This is the East Coast Greenway. It's always this way. We actually want to listen to each community and hear, how do you want your section of the East Coast Greenway? And do that kind of public engagement, working with the agencies, working with everyone involved at every level, from planning, design to construction, and engaging the people of that community into that whole process, listening and taking action based on how we listen. They'll feel heard, and we'll develop something that they're going to love. They're going to have that buy-in. But I also want to say something around the gentrification piece. It's because it's rare. Anything that's rare, a diamond, a pearl, think about it. What's rare? Some special penny with the D or the PSD, that little off, little whatever, the three-legged buffalo nickel. We have to make East Coast greenways. We've got to flood the market with greenways. And that way, everyone will have access to that higher quality of life. And it won't be that coveted beachfront property that it is today. It will be available for everyone's enjoyment. And it won't send the prices up in a hyper-local context. So that's an important economics piece that I want to bring into that, and how we can make it in a way, how we can develop a greenway system, as we've talked about, that's available and accessible, that lowers the cost of transportation. When I take the bike share around the city, it's so much cheaper than getting around in any other way. And I love it. And I remember conversations back in 2008, 2009, 2010, advocating for bike share. And what do we have now? It's amazing. So I want for us to keep developing that kind of a resource. Bike share started in Manhattan, and it's expanded to all the boroughs, and it's strong, and it's serving so many people, millions and millions of rides. So let's do more of that. Make it accessible, and flood the market with it so everyone can enjoy it.
Yeah, and actually you inspired me with some additional comments. Don't worry, I won't keep you hostage on this question forever. But, I'm thinking about, as you're describing the beauty of the Greenway, sometimes in undersourced neighborhoods, they don't maintain greenways either. So you're riding your bike and you're getting hit with weeds. You're getting hit with tree branches. There's garbage like embedded in the weeds. There's trucker bombs out there, and you're like, I actually don't want to get a tick or like covered in urine while I'm riding my bike. So maybe I'm not going to ride my bike here anymore. And with the bike share piece too, we need to be doing everything that we can to take the steps to make bike share publicly owned. Because bike share cannot be something that is being profit driven as it is in this city. And we know that the cost of the e-bikes, which are truly the most accessible version of bike share, have skyrocketed at this point. And, even I keep it on my expense card because I'm like, I can't pay this much to ride the bike, around all day. So, we have to be really serious in thinking about these equity pieces when it comes to how the use changes from neighborhood to neighborhood and from greenway to greenway. So I totally agree with you, and I think there's some pieces that the government really has to step in on.
You touched on something that I think is very important, and I know Allegra would love to hear more about, which is maintenance. But on top of that, I think there is an aspect to what you said about the neighborhoods and also kind of like piggybacking. So the question was, how can we encourage more BIPOC riders? For those who don't know what BIPOC means, is Black, Indigenous, people of color, New Yorkers to feel more comfortable using. But what I would add to that even more is when I started riding as an adult again over a decade ago, there was obviously less folks in the inner city riding, and it was those folks usually who had to ride because they couldn't afford the other forms of transportation, or they lived in those areas where there aren't other forms. And also, there weren't the amount of women on bikes or people who are non-binary or something other than male or female on bikes back then. Not the case now. However, there is still that issue that most of the people you see, many of the spandex folks, are usually more affluent in income and or white, which also those infrastructure changes happen in neighborhoods that those are the criteria. So like, it's kind of twofold, and I know it's kind of long, but getting more folks that are not your traditional folks out there to understand that this is for you as well as the maintenance, for sure. Like, how do y'all handle maintenance in your district along the East Coast Greenway outside of New York City?
Yeah, definitely. Well, there are a lot of different elements, as you know, but like one of the key things is representation. And so what are the images we're putting out? Are we putting out images where everyone can see themselves out on the Greenway? And so making sure when we're doing our photography, when we're doing our videography, that we're telling stories across the gamut, across culture, And we love to talk about the rich culture of the East Coast Greenway. Again, the pies, the ironbound, sitting down and having in Newark and having a Portuguese meal that will take you 3 hours to complete. It's so delicious. So telling the stories where everyone feels connected to it and they see themselves walking, running, biking, whatever the case is, out on the Greenway, showing it's a welcoming space. And putting on programming. I think that's a really important element of it. Like, we're going to have a walk at Starlight Park on Sunday. And it's not like a run for 100 miles, right? That's only a few people can do that. But it's a walk for a mile, a bit more than a mile. And it's something that's accessible for everyone. And when we build out the Greenway, we try to build it out in ways that are ADA accessible. That are spaces, not with a bunch of staircases and things like that, not with steep grades. We design greenways in ways that try to be accessible for everyone. So we've got to do a lot of messaging, and we've got to show that representation of every different kind of person out on the Greenway and enjoying it. Can I touch on maintenance real quick?
Yes, please.
So up in Maine in November, so it's not just our democracy on the ballot in November, but it's also like up in Maine, they're going to have a trails bond that is on the ballot. And it's $30 million, but if you think in New York funding, that's $600 million, right? If you adjust it per capita for state, right? So that'd be like a $600 million bond for the state of New York. And it's not just to build out sections of the Greenway and greenways, but it's also for maintenance. So we have to build that in as often as we can. And we have to have funding mechanisms for that. So we need things like congestion pricing here in New York. We need to hold our electeds accountable to make sure that happens. We need things like maybe a little bit less free parking in New York. We're giving it away, and that's a very small sliver of the people in New York that have cars that are getting free parking. We're not saying no parking, but we should charge for that parking. You know, it costs money. And so how do we adjust for that? How do we keep the carrots and the sticks? We can adjust by handing out transit passes when we when we charge a good rate for parking. So everyone gets their fair share and their fair shake, and we're good. We have a sustainable system that's financially ready to invest in both the build-out of the Greenway system, but also in the maintenance that maintains a world-class system for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, maintenance takes money, and I think one of our biggest problems is, you know, our mayor, period. I think, you know, we also, some of these things can become a little unclear about who is responsible for maintenance in different parts of urban life. And so sometimes my office will call, you know, a bunch of different agencies and be talking to them, and something will be DOT or something will be Parks. Parks will have like a certain process, DOT will have a certain process, and so then you're ending up spending a lot of time of both like our staff and their staff trying to figure out who's supposed to be bottom line and cutting the lawn, right? And that can be very draining on staff and on resources, and it doesn't get the job done. So I think, you know, a lot of the reasons why things get done on the street or by government officials is because there's a certain attitude that people come to us with about potholes or, you know, other issues with their car that I think more of us need to adopt and train each other to adopt, especially people whose voices are rarely listened to say, like, the street is also mine, and I deserve this maintenance, and I need you to do this, and I will not rest until you do. Because that's the only way that investment really gets made in those spaces. And I think that, you know, unfortunately, all of the people who are happy with you when you're an elected official rarely say anything, and all the people that hate you say something every single chance they get. So if you love something and you flood the person responsible for it with praise, it's going to be like, you know, like you're hydrating them, right? So they need that, and like you have to be at the clip of their heels, making sure that they are doing what you want. And there are many state legislators and city legislators who want to see this system improved and pushed forward, but they're hearing more from the haters. So I think we have to be ecstatic lovers of cycling to really get things fixed and done.
All right, so what I'm hearing is also some political will from those who are already there. You know, agencies, stuff there, but political will. Something that, there's some really great questions here, and one thing what I will make sure is that these folks will get these questions. Since I don't work for them, I won't promise you'll get a response, but they'll get the questions if we don't get to say it tonight, right now. Funding. I know it's something that's come up a little bit, but I want to talk about something, or I'm going to ask you specifically, what, aside from funding, what is some of the largest obstacles that you face? Because we all get it. If there's mad money, it all gets paid for, it all gets done. Everyone's happy except the people who solely drive cars. But outside of funding, what is the biggest challenge and obstacle that you face to get the projects that you are hoping to have done or completed?
I would say the amount of time that the plans take to be approved and all of the things that can get in the way during that time. You know, things can quickly become, you know, I talked a little bit about political will. My boondoggle on McGinnis Boulevard was all signed, sealed, and right before it was delivered, bam, it all became like a mess of politics. So I think sometimes it's a question of steering this very slow process forward before it hits a nail and the tires deflate, is the biggest thing that gets in my way.
Yeah. Well, I want to start with funding and then go into it. So with funding, it's always a challenge, but right now, 2% of the nation's transportation investment goes to biking and walking. 2%. And if we want to grow, well, we already have 13 to 14% of trips. So, and we're also visionary, right? We want to tackle climate change, right? I hope so. And I see a lot of politicians that nod and say, yes, they want to tackle climate change. But we have to be a top priority. We can't just be number 10 because, I wanted to, but I just didn't get to it. And that's not good enough. So we have to have that political will to go up high enough, to be a high enough priority so that it gets funded. And the money is there. It took the same amount of money to complete one bridge of I-95 over the Potomac River near D.C. as it would take to complete the rest of the 3,000 miles of East Coast Greenway that we need to complete. So that's it. The money is there. We just have to have the political will to access it and to change from, let's expand a highway, like Highway 17 expansion here in New York is going to cost like $1 billion. And yeah, we've got projects in the Bronx as well. Well, if you're going to do it, maybe we say, no, don't do it. But if you're going to do it, then you need to also give $1 billion or $2 billion to building out greenways throughout New York City. So we need to negotiate. We need to really put those stories out there to access the funding that does indeed exist today, especially over the next 3 years of this federal infrastructure moment. Now, in terms of what are some of the challenges, and I'd like to I absolutely agree with you, but one of the other challenges that we face today is we do have a divided nation in terms of a media system that is full of an echo chamber over here and an echo chamber over there. And it's trying to politicize and other one or the other. And so greenways are universally appealing. We can connect with everyone across the aisle. That's one of the powers that we have. But it's very challenging to communicate that in today's media system. So it takes a lot of focus on communications, active organizing, and I like what you're saying around this really radical love, this radical push forward together that is really necessary to build the relationships and the stakeholders to move visionary projects together. It's very challenging, but we're going to get it done.
I saw you had, you good? You cool?
Yeah, I think what I was going to add was, I think also a lot of folks think of the Greenway as like a nice thing, but not an essential thing. So that's why it ends up at number 10 instead of number 3. And I think there has to be that gets back into that issue that I was bringing up earlier of really, letting the wider usership be more visible, and actually asking them to be more visible, instead of it just being a casual kind of recreation. This is a way of having safe, energy efficient, climate resilient transportation. And I think actually talking about the benefits to prevent flooding and other things like that, that resiliency piece, the way that it will eventually save money for the state and for the country, because it will be much more permeable and much more much better at reducing the fossil fuel situation, is a critical part of the conversation too. So the communications piece is exactly right.
Absolutely. Could I build off that real quick?
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure.
So I want to bring up another example. So the city of Philadelphia, where they have philanthropy. William Penn Foundation has been funding greenways as ways to connect more with the water. As we've talked about, the waterfront, Schuylkill River, the Delaware River, and it's a huge success. Just like the Bronx River as well, where you see wildlife coming back. Those are the kinds of benefits that we see. And we've actually done a report on completing the East Coast Greenway in Greater Philadelphia. It would cost about $250 million. It's a big number. That's tough. But what would we get as a return? The return on investment. Just like she's saying, the return on investment is huge. For every dollar spent, we would get $10 or more in health, environmental, and economic benefits. So we can't afford not to invest in completing greenways. That is absolutely critical. We're going to see the best returns of any infrastructure investment that we can make building out these greenways.
All right, there's some really good pointed questions for you each individually. And there's a lot of stuff focusing on funding. How do we get government to fund certain stuff? How do we advocate for those spaces? We've had the EDC here. We've had parks. We've had DOT. What's a conversation that we're not having? What's a question, aside, obviously you haven't read the pile. What's a question, whether it's in this space or in the spaces that you work on, that you're not getting enough of? Like, what is someone not asking you that you, like, please ask me this so I can amplify it?
Well, I've been working with the Greenway Initiative, thinking about how we might get access to the Environmental Bond Act funds that that have been put into place, and thinking also about, funding in the budget. We've done letters together, but I think we could do even more with that if there was a push for that, and really connecting also with environment, like with the environmental justice components of how this can repair harm. The Greenway and the environmental infrastructure can help repair communities that have been really damaged by our carelessness and the industries that we've allowed to be in certain spaces.
Yes. One question I'd love to hear is, so how do we get to where we are? And was it just one person up here that made all the decisions, and that's how we've advanced biking? Because I want to say, this is all about individuals like you stepping up and being a leader in your role, whatever that role is that you have. So I want to share just a couple stories from the past. So again, Karen Votava, she was the director of planning, open space planning in New York City. She not only did that and developed the Greenway plan for the whole city, but she was visionary and said, I want to work beyond that. I want to connect Maine to Florida. And she laid the foundation for this iconic parks development. There are other heroes like Terry Carta. Is she in?
Yeah.
Today? There she is. Who had the vision. We're doing this Greenway stimulus work on the national level. She had the vision here in New York City to say, we need to build a coalition. And that was back in late 2020, early 2021, and 34 organizations signed on, saying, we need $1 billion for greenways in New York City. And that led to us coming together today and the summit that we had a year and a half ago or so, and for us to be sharing everything that we're sharing. So again, it wasn't just Newton that stood on the shoulders of giants before him. It's all of us. And giants like Karen Votava, like Terry Carta, like John Orcutt, who I think is here as well, doing incredible work. And there's another I want to share, and that's Roger Hers. And he passed away about 2 years ago. But he lived a life in New York City. Once he started biking, he picked up his bicycle in the 1960s as an adult and started riding. And he said, this is the best thing for New York. Everyone needs access to this, the joy of cycling, and they need it to be safe. And so he stood up in times where it wasn't so easy. There were times where they tried to ban biking in Midtown Manhattan in the 80s. There were also powers that were, at the time, that said no more biking on Brooklyn Bridge. And people like Roger Hers, in their volunteer capacity, stood up and said no. And they built organizations. He was one of the co-founders of Transportation Alternatives. They built organizations, they advocated as individuals, and they laid the foundation for where we are today. So I want us all to be like Roger, to be like Karen, to be like Terry and so many others. I want to say Elizabeth Brody, who passed away last year. She was an amazing East Coast Greenway advocate based Central Park South. And she and I went around in 2008, 09, and 2010 building a coalition to close the gap on the East River and to sign on community organization after community organization, working with partners in this room to make sure that we put in motion what's happening right now. And that's that we're going to be able to safely bike, walk, and run around all of Manhattan, especially on the east side. So let's be like these heroes in whatever way we want to do it. You don't have to be president or mayor or city council or community board member. In whatever way you want to engage, I applaud you, and we want to support you in achieving the dreams that you have.
Thank you for that. Yeah, clap for that. That was good shit. I can say shit because I don't get paid and I'm not elected. That's one of the benefits of being a volunteer. I want to afford you an opportunity to also, we've talked about a lot of different stuff, and the last two questions, I'll give this one, let y'all wrap it up fairly quickly, and then we'll go on to the next. What's something that has worked for you dealing with city, state, government agencies, and for some odd reason, it just hasn't happened again? And he's like, why are we not doing this again and or more? And that could go for either one of you,
I would say, at the state legislature, you have to understand it is oriented to car use. The Transportation Committee focuses on highways. And what I need you all to do is to focus your energy on the chair of the Transportation Committee, because that's who decides what moves in the Transportation Committee. So I can do my best, but if you focus your efforts on the chair, who's from Syracuse, William Magnarelli, that is who is holding the keys to the car. So I would say, you can talk all day to your allies, but a lot of times it's not the allies that get to make the decision. It's the people who do not want this to happen that are in the way. So it feels great to talk to me, but you need to hold these other people accountable. And I want you to keep talking to me, but that's who you got to go for. And I saw a lot more visceral action around Sammy's Law in the last 2 years than I ever saw before, and that's what you need to do. You have to be unignorable. You are not a nice middle-class white woman, You are a rabid, angry person who is not getting the investment that they deserve. That's their tax money, okay? That's the energy that I need to see you take. And I'm not saying be nasty. I'm saying be relentless, because that's what gets things moving up there. If they can ignore you, they will ignore you. There's too many other people there offering them a lot of money to do what they want. So money is a major player. We've got the oil and gas industry. We've got the car industry. We've got the trucking unions. All of those people are showing up in ways that you guys aren't. So think about who your enemies are and orient in their direction.
Yeah.
Why nobody's clapping for that?
Yeah.
I scared them. They're nice.
Yeah. So I want to go back to one thing that worked here in New York. One of our advisory board members was working on, had a vision for this Empire State Trail, and had a meeting with then Governor Cuomo and got over $200 million to help build out that vision. And so since then, we haven't had a governor step up and say, that's a vision that I want to fund. Working with the assembly members, and getting all the right people lined up, and then moving forward a big vision. So I think there's great potential to look at that and try that strategy again, and to develop our vision together in a way that we're all feeling good about it. And then we all go to Albany together and put that forward, just like Jeff Olson did and a number of advocates did to move forward the Empire State Trail. We've got to do it to continue that kind of progress in a big visionary way. I think we can do it.
Awesome. And just something popped into my head earlier. You was talking about 2% of a budget is allocated for bike-specific transportation, right?
Biking and walking, yep.
Yeah, biking and walking. So when you said that earlier, it reminded me of how here in New York City, less than 1% of our budget is allocated to parks and green spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Less than one, right. And for those who don't know what those numbers mean, you could simply Google New York City budget and see how much other agencies are getting, and then ask yourself, and this is where one of the spaces, I give a lot of shit to city agencies, and these folks know it's not personal, but I have to, because it's not personal to them. It's personal to the system. But then ask yourself, how is it that these agencies are going to do what we're asking them to do with the amount of money they're being allocated compared to other spaces? So I just remember that now, and it kind of came back to mind. So I do want to allot y'all an opportunity to kind of toot your own horns, as the agencies here have done today. Shout out something or give credit to a project, or just, I'm going to give you a few minutes, let's say 3 minutes each of you, to kind of just, talk your shit, really give it up, for yourselves.
Well, I think, I've been in office for only 4 years. I'm going into my third term, and I've already gotten 2 major streets closed for open streets. I've gotten, and I mean, I say me, but it was really the rabid activists in my district, and they're not afraid to be rabid, and neither should you. I got McGinnis Boulevard is starting to happen. It's not perfect, but I mean, don't quote me on this, but it's still a lot effing better than it was, okay? Even if it's not what we want, it is not as bad as it was. And I got my dream intersection at the bottom of the Pulaski Bridge, where there's an area for bikes, there's an area for people walking and running, there's a stoplight, there's a turn light, and there's a slowing down of traffic. There's a place for you to cross with your bike to get on the bike lane. I feel like I am really pushing things towards a different orientation around transportation, and I've really pissed off some people, but I have also really made things happen, and that's what you can't be afraid to piss people off. And I'm glad and proud that I don't care if I piss people off. Thank you.
Nice. I just want to say, Vince and I won a basketball championship. Oh, wait, we're talking work. We're talking work, my bad. No, just kidding. But we did in grad school. It was awesome. But essentially, I want to say the East Coast Greenway, I've been working there for 15 years, and we've over doubled the number of miles completed. Again, we're the most visited park, and we're turning philanthropy, we're leveraging any philanthropy into huge results. And I'm really happy about that. But very young, scrappy, and hungry at the same time. And we have to step up for the climate. We have to step up for public health. We have to step up for the social fabric of our country and our communities. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to applaud the work of everyone in the New York City Greenways Coalition and everyone here today, and want to say that we are with you at the Greenway Alliance. Sophia is right here on the ground if you need anything. We want to help you achieve all your dreams and more, and we're excited to be here today, so thank you.
All right, folks, again, I will give these cards to these folks, and I just realized they don't have contact info on them, so feel free to harass them while you see them walking by, especially in the next 5 minutes, where we're going to have a little quick 5-minute break, and then right after that, we'll be hearing from Parks Commissioner Sue Donahue. So 5 minutes, and then let's give our attention back to the rest of the panels. Thank you.